On your Wednesday episode of Locked On Raptors, just how irresponsible will I get with my Jacoby Walter projections? We'll find out as we answer that and many more mailbag questions coming up. Thanks for hanging.
You are Locked On Raptors, your daily Toronto Raptors podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hey, what's going on? And welcome to another episode of Locked On Raptors, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. It is Wednesday, December the 11th. And I'm your host, Sean Woodley. I've been covering the Toronto Raptors now for 11 seasons on various platforms. You can find all my work over on the socials, Blue Sky, Instagram with the podcast account. You can also join us in the Discord server, link in the description of the podcast. Great little listener family we got building around the show. The Sicko Den, as they call it. Come be part of the Sicko Den. It's a great place to come hang out and not do work tasks during the day and instead talk ball. Of course, you can also subscribe for free to the daily Locked On Raptors newsletter written by yours truly at the very top. And then you get Katie Heindel 4 times a week with a national story, Michael Shearer from Basketball Poetry once a week on Thursdays. And then, of course, you get Josh Lloyd fantasy tips. It's great. It's also 100% free to sign up and get it sent to your inbox. So why wouldn't you do it? That's a perfect value proposition. You get great coverage for no money in this world. That's a beautiful thing. So please go do that. You can go to the QR code on the screen if you're watching on YouTube, or you can go to the link in the description of the podcast to sign up there. Today's show is brought to you by our friends at Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, use the code LOCKEDONNBA for $20 off your first purchase. And we are off and running here on a Wednesday edition of the podcast, taking a look at some mailbag questions. It's an off day. The Raptors are in the midst of a 2 games in 9-day stretch, and so I lean on you, the little piggies at the trough, feeding me. It's a nice little reverse relationship here where you send me the questions and the content, and I wax poetic about the questions you have. We've got questions today about what it is the Raptors need to go from where they are now to contender status. That's fun. We'll talk about AJ Lawson, the new two-way signing, a guy who I have called games for in the past in the CEBL. I'll give you my admittedly like 3 or 4 year old scouting report on AJ Lawson. And we've got the most important question of all, which is Mogbo. Indeed, Mogbo. We'll talk about that later on as well. But first, Jacoby Walter. First question here comes from our pal Barney Bass, the resident optimist in the Locked On Raptors Discord, asking, it's still early in Jacoby Walter's development, but so far he looks good. Can you think of a player comparison who he might turn out to be like, and what do you think his ceiling is? We are very early in the Jacoby Walter experience. He's played 11 NBA games. He has started 4 NBA games. He's playing 18 minutes a game. Teensy, tiny sample size here for Jacoby Walter. And look, don't look at the shooting metrics if you want to feel good about Jacoby Walter. As I've said, like I said it on yesterday's show, like they belie his impact. He has been, I think, way more looking the part of an NBA player than his raw shooting stats would tell you. If you're watching the games, Jacoby Walter is popping off the screen, even though the threes have not been falling. He's up to 20% from 3 after going 3 of 7 in that game on Monday night against the, oh God, who the hell they play? The Knicks. That's right. And so he's working his way. The regression to the mean in the positive direction hopefully has begun after he began the year shooting 15% from downtown and was in the low 30s in true shooting. I think, though, there is a really interesting player archetype developing here because, look, there's not a rich history in the NBA of guys who kind of are sort of built with the gunner's spirit as kind of part of their makeup. I do think that's part of Jacoby Walter's game. He has the pull-up game, sort of likes to call his own number at times. I do think the way he calls his own number is, within the flow of the offense. It's never something where he's just kind of taking a possession for the sake of taking a possession. He's doing it because it works for what the team needs at the given time. Oh, Jacoby Walter walking into a mid-range pull-up. Okay, yeah, this is exactly what the doctor ordered. Or it has been at the times he's dipped into that tool bag. And I think as the threes start to come around, which I do think they will, I know he wasn't a great shooter in college, 34%. I think the quality of his looks was, not super high in college. He was, a big target for defenses with that Baylor team last year. And he was taking really tough looks off the bounce, off movement, stuff like that. I do think the threes are going to come around and be, if not like dead eye 40% level, like mid 30s, high 30s. I think that's where he's going to kind of level off. The shot looks good. He's confident in it. The team is emboldening him to take it. That all is sort of suggesting to me that the shot is in fact going to come around. And then when you factor in the sort of gunner side of things with the defense, like we don't see many gunners who play defense. It's kind of a binary thing, right? Where if you're emboldened with the gunner's spirit, then you're probably not going to be an incredible defender at the other end. And there are exceptions, surely, but it does feel like a bit of a unique thing where he has this sort of quick twitch creation juice that is going to play, I think, very well in second units for sure. And maybe it scales up to something you can have in your starting lineup and lean on. And then he couples that with, I think, really nice defensive instincts, really good defensive footwork. I think he's someone who's going to be able to kind of guard 1 through 3 on the positional spectrum. I think you're going to be able to throw him on quick guards, and he's got the footwork and the speed and the skinniness to get over screens and fight through and not get caught up and stay with his man, stay on his man's hip at the very least. And so I do think it is kind of a tough guy to think of comps for. And I'm not someone who loves comps. I think comps are kind of lazy and they kind of undercut my favorite thing about basketball, which is everybody is a beautiful snowflake and is very different and has a totally unique game specific to them. There are similarities, sure. There are things you can compare and contrast and things that kind of overlap in guys' games, but everyone is their own person and entity. And so comps are tough. But I think if I'm thinking of like, where does Walter fit into the construct of a good team? Right now, to me, he's kind of giving off vibes of really good sixth man who closes a lot of games for you. And I'm not going to say he's James Harden or anything like that, but similar mold to early career James Harden with the Thunder, where he was someone who didn't start games, but was more often than not on the floor to close. And because he had that sort of two-way viability, there was just so many different ways you can use him and work him into lineups. He can handle the ball a little bit. He's got the defensive chops. He's a good rebounder for, what he's been able to show off so far. He seems to have a really nice nose for the ball. The playmaking stuff, I think that's going to be sort of a longer-term project with him, but you can see there's sort of a natural feel and understanding and timing that is not super easy to teach, and I think that's going to come along. He's someone who I think is going to be additive to good teams if all breaks right? He's 20 years old. Rookies crash out all the time. Development is not linear, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. We're just talking about pie in the sky, high-end ambitions here. And I think like an 80th percentile outcome from him is someone who's like winning 6 Man of the Year awards and is closing games on good teams and is offering really nice two-way scoring and defense. And it's not just straight 3 and D, it's defense plus like kind of this multifaceted offensive package that, allows him to be on the floor when things matter most. There's probably some sort of, top 5 percentile outcome here where he becomes some sort of on-ball creative, borderline star, maybe kind of all-star adjacent type guy. That's a long ways away. So I'm not going to put that on him right now. But I do think, yes, the shooting numbers so far have not been good, but if the threes come around the way I think they can, and the 2-point scoring and the rim pressure, which is a real thing with him, if those can kind of hold up here on top of him knocking down threes, there is a really valuable two-way player here who can be on the floor for your team in big games when it matters most. And that is a pretty exciting thing. And if that happens, like that's a game changer for the franchise, right? Like you can take someone at 19th and more often than not, you're just hoping they're a viable rotation player. If he's something more than that, and you already have the number of guys you have in the door right now, Jonathan Mogbo continues on his trajectory. One of Jamal Shedder, Jamison Battle carves it a long-term role. All of a sudden, you're looking at like super like affordable and effective depth. And who knows what that becomes beyond that for Jacoby Walter. It also gives you more flexibility with trades, right? If you have Walter and Ochai and RJ Barrett and Grady Dick kind of in this wing rotation, and we'll talk about them coming up a little bit sort of as a whole. I'm really excited about that group as sort of an interchangeable quartet of guys. But if something comes along where there's a trade and it's like, oh, well, the team really wants Grady Dick back for this star, you can talk yourself into that being okay now because Jacoby Walter's there to kind of fill in that void. This is how great teams are built. It's just you get a lot of dudes and you have multiple guys at different spots. It's like shark's teeth coming in and filling in the spots when one guy goes out. And I do think Jacoby Walter is fitting the bill so far of a guy who can one day grow into someone who is just like a really valuable two-way piece that gives your roster a lot of flexibility, gives your lineups lots of flexibility, And I think the fit with Scottie Barnes in particular. I mean, shooting plus Barnes, I've said it a million times, that is going to be a hell of a combo for many, many years to come. And if the shots start to fall with Jacoby Walter, which they did in the last game, it's a really big deal for that sort of partnership long term as well. We'll come back on the other side. We got a few more mailbag questions to plow through on today's show, including what does this team need to become contenders? Are they close? Is it really far away? Is it just one piece? We'll get into my thoughts on that coming up in just one sec. Today's show is brought to you by our good friends over at FanDuel, the #1 sportsbook in North America, which you can go and check out right now. And new customers can bet $5 and get $150 in bonus bets if you win. That's a pretty cool thing. The FanDuel Sportsbook app gives you everything you need to place live bets on the NFL all in one place. So when you get a hunch in the middle of the game, you can check out the latest stats, view live play-by-play, and so much more on the same page where you place your bets. Just visit FanDuel.com to join today. You'll get started with $150 in bonus bets if you win your first $5 bet. And it's not just for NFL fans, though that is a big part of their platform. But if you're someone who likes to bet on nightly NBA spreads, you want to throw down some NBA Cup money on the Thunder who advanced or the Bucks who advanced, you can go and do that as well. It's super fun. And look, the Toronto Raptors, they are the #2 team in the league against the spread record. They cover the spread quite a bit. You could probably make some money just betting them to cover every single night, even with Scottie Barnes out. They do it seemingly no matter who's in the lineup. They are a feisty, nasty, annoying bunch. So go do that over at FanDuel.com. Never waste a hunch and make every moment more with FanDuel, an official sportsbook partner of the NFL. Today's show is also brought to you by our friends over at Mint Mobile, one of the newer sponsors here on the podcast. With big wireless providers, what you see is never what you get. Somewhere between the store and your first month's bill, the price you thought you were paying magically skyrockets. With Mint Mobile, you'll never have to worry about gotchas ever again. When Mint Mobile says it's $15 a month to purchase a 3-month plan, they mean it. Say goodbye to your overpriced wireless plans, jaw-dropping monthly bills, and unexpected overages. Those damn overages, I tell you. They're the worst. Also, the worst is having to change your phone number every time you change a plan. Not an issue here. You get to use your own phone, and any Mint Mobile plan will bring your phone number along with all your existing contacts over. That is pretty sweet. To get this new customer offer and your new 3-month premium wireless plan for just $15 a month, go to mintmobile.com/lockedinNBA. That's mintmobile.com/lockedinNBA. Cut your wireless bill to $15 a month at mintmobile.com/lockedinNBA. $45 upfront payment required. New customers on first 3-month plan only. Speeds slower above 40 gigabytes on unlimited plan. Additional taxes, fees, and restrictions apply. See Mint Mobile for details. Back at it here, fielding your listener questions on today's show. Also, just a heads up, today's newsletter post, I'm talking about dunks and the lack thereof for your Toronto Raptors, a thing that's kind of bothering me. It's a fun, bad team, but they could be so much more fun if they would just dunk, please. Look forward to that in the newsletter. Subscribe again on the screen. You got the QR code if you're watching on YouTube, or the link in the description of the podcast if you want to click through and subscribe there. We've got a ton of subs over there. It's like, I think we're closing in on 500. It's pretty awesome. You're all amazing. Please keep on getting that momentum going. All right, next question here comes from Mystical Illusion in the Locked On Raptors Discord. By the way, this is the way to get your questions answered on the podcast. Be in the Discord. Drop them in the mailbag chat, and that's where I'll see them and drop them into the show. So Mystical Illusion asks, let me bring up the question on the screen for those watching. How much more does this team need in order to propel themselves into contender status for many years to come? Is it a couple reliable rotation players, a key starter, a cornerstone, or multiple cornerstones? Is there a nucleus of winning basketball here? I guess it kind of depends what your sort of definition of winning basketball is. You did say contender status. And so look, it's really hard to be a contender at any time. There are 3 or 4 teams at any point that kind of have a realistic chance of winning the title. And it's usually tied to having a player on your team who is one of those franchise-altering, landscape-shifting star players. Those guys don't come around often. Those guys often land on your team via super dumb luck, whether it's you win the draft lottery or you happen to draft a guy 15th overall and he becomes Giannis Antetokounmpo, or you happen to stumble into Nikola Jokic with a second-round pick. There is no rhyme or reason, really, to getting those top-of-the-league talents. Luka Doncic could have been had by 2 teams, 3 teams, and ended up on a 4th team in the Dallas Mavericks. Like, it's a lot of dumb luck, and yes, there's some angling forward and, stealth tanking and stuff like that that can help increase your chances of luck, but true contender status is typically reserved for the teams that just have the rabbit's foot up their ass and end up getting one of those guys. And so for me, like my bar for what I'm hoping to see any team at any time build towards is be a perennial playoff team, be a team that's there, and then parlay your position into being better than that. Maybe you get lucky and have a run because the injury situation lines up, or you catch lightning in a bottle and NBA weird stuff happens and you find yourself in a conference finals or a finals. Great. That's super fun. Just being there every single year, it begets being more good and more relevant over time because your players get better. They have higher profiles. They are easier to trade for good players to upgrade your roster. And I'm not saying you're always going to find a Kawhi Leonard trade out there, but there are many avenues to finding trades. And the Raptors currently, I think, as I've talked about, are kind of building a case as one of these sort of laying in wait consolidation trade teams with how successful this past draft was. You get Walter and Mogbo and Shed and Battle as a UDFA, all without a pick in the top 18. That's game-changing stuff. They have the Blazers pick this year, which is going to be high 30s. They have their own first-round pick, which could be as high as 1, could be very high. It's going to be in the lottery one way or another, it seems. So there's that. You have the Pacers pick and your own pick in 2026. Like there's a lot of stuff here to go and add to what the Raptors already have, which is kind of a lot just in terms of volume. Maybe the quality of the guys they have, you want to upgrade a little bit. But I do think right now there are the pieces in place for this to be a playoff team. I know there's some skepticism out there. Tim Legler, the wonderful Tim Legler, who's like one of the better national analysts there is, kind of expressed some Raptors skepticism on his All NBA podcast with Adam Mares yesterday. Yeah, that's fine. Whatever. Like everyone can have different opinions. I generally tend to think like the national angle on the Raptors, as good as the people who cover the league nationally are, it tends to sort of lean dismissive until it's proven. And I get it. The Raptors haven't had their players healthy. They haven't, seen Barrett, Barnes, and Quickly play together since March the 1st. Like, I understand the skepticism here. And with every injury and every sort of delay in seeing them together, it just grows more atrophy to the idea that this can be a team that can go win games. I think the way they've constructed this roster, it just makes a lot of sense. And I do think even if there's like a talent gap that the Raptors have against maybe the top 2 or 3 or 4 teams in the Eastern Conference, I think the sort of value of a lot of good players, no bad players, and fit can bring you a long way. And I do think there is the core of a top 6 playoff team here in the next couple of seasons. I think the fact that they've been so competitive this year, despite having guys out, they have so many dudes who are just like adding things when they're on the floor. And they just have, again, I think a pretty interchangeable set of wings they can kind of play with. And Scottie Barnes does so much as like an engine, and I think is only going to get better at that as the environment around him gets more conducive to his success, with Quickly being available and Walter taking a step up, Kelly Olynyk being back now. Obviously, it's going to be a while till we see Scottie Barnes and Emmanuel Quickly again. It's still another false start, another delay to seeing this crew together. But just imagining these pieces together at something close to full health, there's a real functional, sensible team here. I think the concept of kind of your core pillars, let's just talk about like closing time, for example. Your core pillars being Emmanuel Quickly, Scottie Barnes, and Jakob Poeltl. The 3 guys, they're closing every single game. They're out there. Quickly's bringing the pull-up juice and the stretch and the downhill creation of the pick-and-roll backbone with Jakob Poeltl. Scottie Barnes is Scottie Barnes. He's your defensive wrecking crew. He's your engine of offensive creation, all of this stuff. And then you have this collection of wings I talked about earlier, the Grady Dick, Ochai Agbaji, RJ Barrett, and Jacoby Walter crew, which, there's still plenty of development to be done here by Grady and Walter in particular. RJ may be close to a finished product. We'll see where it goes with Ochai. But if Ochai is just the guy he's been, a 45% three-point shooter who's the most trustworthy man in the NBA, that's perfect. That's awesome. That is a great 7th or 8th man to have on your team long-term, and a really good guy to have, like that. That's a high-end 7th or 8th man who can play and close games for you. And I do think there's going to be like a really fun, what I'm looking forward to most, I think, of this next stretch without Scottie Barnes is these 4 guys kind of duking it out and sort of showing what they've got and fighting for the minutes once this team is whole, right? I think in particular, Grady and Walter, like those 2 guys going at it with one another. They both bring different things to the table. Walter, more of a 2-way guy. Grady with that more sort of quick strike offense and fluidity, and the off-ball movement and stuff like that is incredible with him. He's never standing still. constantly pulling defenders with him wherever he's going. It's a really great thing to watch that guy play. And I do think, there's all these different iterations of Quickly plus, let's say, Grady and Walter, the shooting guys with Barnes and Pirtle. That's super fun. You've got Quickly with Barrett and Ochai, the sort of a bigger bruising, maybe a better defensive crew there with some more finishing talent with Barrett on top of Barnes and Pirtle. Maybe a little bit less shooting in that group, but it's like big and nasty. That can be a fun one. You've got, the possibility of the Kansas boys, Ochai and Grady being those two guys who fill in, Walter and Barrett. Like, you can mix and match those guys, and that's just really sensible to me. You're not married to having to close with two of those guys at all times. Like, you can kind of pick the matchup, see who's working, see who's hot, see who's not, and then tweak your rotations, kind of accordingly on a given night. That's pretty interesting to me. You've got Jonathan Mogbo, who is this off the bench, like clearly has carved out the role as the backup center on this team, and I think has left Bruno Fernando in his dust. Yeah, the finishing needs to come along a little bit more, but he's someone who in certain matchup you can swap in and be your small ball five. Or if you want to elongate your lineups and you're maybe not so worried about the shooting, or you have both Grady and Quickly on the floor, you want Barnes, Mogbo, and Pirtle. That's pretty interesting to me because you have just, light on shooting, but you have your two best shooters out there and arguably your three most exciting defenders out there. That's a fun little balance of, offense, defense as well. I think the interchangeability of this team, once we all see like all the guys available together, is going to become a real strength that just makes itself obvious. Then you have Kelly Olynyk just as this very stable bench connector guy who makes things easier for second units to run on offense. He brings elasticity to the offense. It just kind of, increases the space, increases the passing juice, all that stuff. He's a really nice guy to have as a ninth man. And then you have, your Davion Mitchells for the rest of this season, Jamal Shed, Jamison Battle, whoever they take in the draft this coming season, you kind of plug into this mix. And I'm pretty intrigued by the mix they have at full health. Again, maybe it's not that Scottie Barnes is a top 10 player in the league, but maybe he's a top 15 to 17 guy, a borderline All-NBA player, maybe a third-team All-NBA guy. And around that, you have such a cohesive and coherent supporting cast that just makes a lot of sense around him that it's able to power you to a lot of regular season wins. What that means for the playoffs, we'll see. They'll probably have to sort of test it out there first and then see what happens and adapt from there. But I do think, they're not far from being a playoff team. Contender-wise, it's probably going to involve some kind of consolidation trade where one of Quickly or Barrett is moved for that star. And who that star is, I have no idea. And this is the thing about the NBA. It's constantly fluid. New guys become available and shake loose all the time. I think you just got to lay in wait and be opportunistic and be in the position to strike. And you do that by just being good. And I do think they're on the way to being at least pretty good to very good and a perennial top 6 team in the Eastern Conference. Like, it's totally on the table here, health provided, of course. We're going to come back on the other side, get into a last couple of questions. We're going to talk about AJ Lawson, the new two-way signing, who I watched a lot of when he was with the Guelph Nighthawks of the CEBL. I'll give you the exclusive AJ Lawson CEBL scouting report, among other things, coming up to close out the show. Today's show is brought to you by friends over at Game Time, the single best place to buy tickets for the sporting events that you want to go to. It's a great thing. I use Game Time all the time. Whenever I'm going to a sporting event, it's the thing I'm looking at to find tickets. I bought tickets this summer for a couple baseball games, went down to Cleveland and Pittsburgh, two stadiums I'd never been to. The seat views made it super easy to pick out the seats I wanted to sit in because I could see what I was going to be seeing. I could track where the sun would be in the sky. Really important when you go to a baseball game. Don't bake yourself in the sun. It's bad news. Game Time helped me so I didn't get sunstroke while watching Paul Skeens pitch with the Pittsburgh Pirates. That's super fun. Of course, Game Time picks filters out the fluff, and you only get the best deals on the best seats. So you are knowing you're getting your bang for your buck when you go and buy tickets for the events you want to go to. They have the lowest price guarantee. Game Time credits you 110% of the difference if you find tickets in the same row and section or less somewhere else. That's pretty sweet. Take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time picks. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use the code LOCKEDONNBA for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account, redeem the code LOCKEDONNBA for $20 off. Download Game Time today. What time is it? Well, it's game time, of course. Wrapping it up here, your mailbag edition of the show. Thanks to all those who sent questions in the Locked On Raptors Discord server. And we'll try to rattle off a rapid fire here through a few. Let's start with a question from our pal Matt T, asking, what are your thoughts on the newest signing, AJ Lawson? bit of a surprise. I talked yesterday on the show about how I thought with DJ Carton getting waived, that third two-way spot might just go to Eugenio Marui, who's got a little bit of size and beef, could maybe be your sort of Bruno Fernando replacement when Fernando inevitably gets waived. His guaranteed date's January the 10th. And it does feel like he's fallen out of favor in the rotation in lieu of Jonathan Mogbo's, rise into just being the backup center. And so, that was kind of my read on the situation. But they go with a different Canadian, an AJ Lawson, who, as I mentioned before, is a CEBL legend. Played for the Guelph Nighthawks for one season back, I think it was 2021 or 2022 with the Guelph Nighthawks. He averaged 16 points, 5 boards, 3 assists, 1.5 stocks during that season with Guelph. He put up a total of, he shot 32% from 3, kind of mid-40s field goal percentage. The CEBL is kind of like this very fast-paced league. There's a lot of missing. There's a lot of makes. It's just like a lot of stuff going on at all times. It's very frenetic basketball in the CEBL. And AJ Lawson was a really nice fit for it because the dude's an athlete. My thought with him was always he felt a little skinny to be someone who could make it in the NBA. He's very slight, but again, a lot of bursts there. He's like 6'7". He's got proper NBA wing size. And, guys bulk up, guys get stronger. He's played 50-something NBA games for the Dallas Mavericks and Minnesota Timberwolves over his time, 42 games for the Mavericks last season. So he was part of the mix on a team. Yeah, it wasn't like he was heavily in the mix or anything like that. He was a garbage time guy, played 7 minutes a night, just averaged 3 points a game. But he's clearly got like some level of NBA talent. The 3-point shooting is the big thing, and it does make it hard to kind of envision where he fits into the mix with, compared to, say, Jamison Battle, where it's like, okay, Battle has an obvious skill that the Raptors need, which is someone to bomb threes. Lawson doesn't quite do that, but he does bring some size that the team needs. And, if he gets into some NBA games as a two-way, I don't think you'll be upset that he's out there. Size and sort of energy and athleticism go a long way in the NBA. I wouldn't sort of bank on AJ Lawson being a major contributor to the NBA team or anything like that. He's going to be a nice 905 hand for sure. And we'll see what happens with Jamison Battle and getting his contract converted at some point here. TBD on that. But yeah, a little surprising because I just thought they would go with someone in-house and, more of sort of like a big adjacent guy, though Eugenio Marui is also like 6'7". He just kind of plays more like a big than AJ Lawson does. But either way, yeah, AJ Lawson, fun guy to watch. He'll dunk a bunch. Love me some dunks, as you'll hear me talk about longingly in the Locked On Raptors Discord, or read me talking about it longingly in the Locked On Raptors newsletter later today. But yeah, that AJ Lawson, I'm in for it because give me more CEBL representation, please. It's important. Next question here comes from our pal Loquacious Drew, simply asking, Mogbo? Yes, Mogbo. 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 I wanted to kind of give you a little bit of a look behind the curtain as to my infatuation with Jonathan Mogbo. It's become a running bit among the Raptors media folks, in particular our pal Joe Wolfond from The Score, who's on this show all the time. There was a time like a couple weeks ago after one of Mobo's big games where I was walking by Wolfond in the tunnel, and he was waiting to talk to someone from the other team. And I kind of didn't really hear him. I mishear things all the time because it's loud and I'm bad at listening to stuff. And like, I thought Wolfond asked me who talked for the Raptors after the game, and it was Mogbo. And so I just answered Mogbo. It was not the question he asked. He was like answering a question I had asked him about who he was talking to. It was very fun miscommunication because it set up a thing now where every time I see Joe Wolfond, he just says Mogbo, and I say Mogbo back. It's the only words we use to communicate with one another. I love Jonathan Mogbo. As I've said before, I'm like really deeply pilled on Jonathan Mogbo in a way that I haven't really been with a Raptors young guy since Terrence Ross. For anyone who listens to this show or has followed my work over the years, Terrence Ross is a bit of a passion of mine, if you will. If you look on the screen here, there's a photo behind me. That's Terrence Ross in the background here of this very shot. I'm a big Terrence Ross guy. I don't say this lightly, but Jonathan Mogbo, the way he plays this sort of power forward with no shooting skill and all of the other skills in the world, really, really is a way after my heart. And it's super fun, man. Like I'm super in on Mogbo, and I do think without Scottie Barnes out, to kind of bring this back to the current state of the team, I'm really looking forward to what kind of run Mogbo is going to get here without Barnes. It feels like he's refined his game just a little bit more than it was in the early part of the year when Scottie first missed time, where he got that one start against Charlotte, looked pretty good, and then kind of went back to the bench and had some ups and downs. It does feel like he's figured out kind of his role. He's learning the center intricacies a little bit more. And I'm excited to see him get some run, maybe even start him sometimes in place of Scottie Barnes. He's not obviously bringing the shot creation that Barnes brings to the table, but he just does a lot of good stuff out there. Like you can sense this guy knows how to play basketball. And I'm really looking forward to, again, it sucks that Scottie Barnes is out. There's no good thing about Scottie Barnes being out. But the silver lining here is like there are good, interesting young players who are going to be here for a while to watch this season in a way that there just weren't last year when things got real dire outside of Grady Dick. Everyone on this team has something to prove, a job to fight for, something to kind of, a status they want to achieve. And I think Jonathan Mogbo fits very much into that. If Scottie Barnes being out means we get 25 to 30 minutes of Jonathan Mogbo, I'll make my peace with Scottie Barnes being out as much as I'll be counting down the days till he's back. It's just, it's a different environment for the Raptors to deal with their injury stuff this year. And Mogbo, big part of that. So yes, indeed, Mogbo. We'll leave it there. Thank you so much for hanging out. We'll talk to you again on Thursday as Katie Heindel's going to come along and we'll have some fun. Maybe we'll bring back the return of Hot Take Heindel, everyone's favorite character, except for Katie Heindel. She does not like when I make her be Hot Take Heindel, which makes for good podcasting, I think. So you have that to look forward to. And then Friday, we'll talk about the Raptors Heat game. And then going into next week, we're going to have our pal Joseph Cacharo on the show. We're going to tee up trade season as December the 15th looms large next week. And we will have that to dive into as well and sort of size up the trade market and what's going to happen for the Raptors, if anything, over the next little while here. That's going to do it. Thanks so much for hanging out. We will talk to you again on Friday or Thursday, another episode of Locked On Raptors. Support the show, follow, subscribe, rate, review, etc. All that good stuff. Newsletter, Discord, you know the deal. And we will talk to you again very soon. Thanks for hanging. Bye-bye. Oh, I think that went in. Just didn't even hit mesh. It's just butter.